The few, the proud, the Jews. So, religions build on each other. And in some way, there's a progression, and in some way, there's an evolution even within individual religions. Taoism, Confucianism offer us this incredible perspective on the world, suggesting that the world is a world of contradictions. And a variety of examples that are given in those Eastern religions are the idea of folkways versus the elite, active versus passive, power, that is coercion, versus inspiration, physical versus spiritual, government versus religion, self versus the community. That has been understood in Judaism as well. In a wonderful Devar Torah that Chancellor Ismar Shorsh, the twice previous chancellor of the seminary, offers in a wonderful Devar Torah on Parshat Ki Tisa, he calls them polarities in life. Polar opposites. And I would suggest one step further, and that is checks and balances. In understanding that there needs to be at some point in all of our lives a way to balance what might become extreme views within ourselves. Because without those checks and balances, sometimes we veer into the absurd. And life can become meaningless, radicalized, fundamentalized, without a sense of check in the system. We can go completely astray. Chancellor Ismar Shorsh says, we have the capacity to hold opposite ideas at the same time, opposite thoughts, opposite inclinations, opposite emotions. We can, as human beings, hold them all at the same time. However, when we do, there's a little room for anything else. It's hard to balance everything in our lives all at once. That's why at some point we need to make space for letting things go. When the extremes become too much, that's the opportunity we have to take to let some things go. When our tradition becomes so burdensome that the fence we've constructed around the Torah doesn't keep the Torah alive, but keeps people far from it, then we've gone too far. When it becomes a distraction, when it becomes an obstacle, when it becomes a boundary to Torah and to a life of meaning and purpose as prescribed by our tradition, then we've gone too far. Our tradition calls those things minhag shtut, silly minhagim. The Beit Yosef, commenting on the Or HaChaim, says about perceived prohibitions like eating legumes on Pesach. We've talked about it so many times. Uminei kitniyot mevushal b'Pesach minhag shtut. Huzulati. It's absurd, he says. And we've taken it on as a fence around a fence around a fence. And then what we've arrived at as people saying, I can't observe Pesach at all. And so it is our task to whittle away, take apart, study, think, and decide. Instead of building a fence around the Torah to protect its laws and practices, sometimes we build fences around the Torah that keeps people away. And then sometimes the entire system seems ridiculous. Often, the rabbis of the Talmud are faced with trying to figure out what is the law. In some cases, the arguments for both sides of the equation are good. Sometimes the rabbis, in trying to decipher what will be the result of enacting a law a specific way, will that keep people closer to Torah or will that drive them away? The rabbis sometimes say, Puk dine chazye. Go out and see what people are actually doing. In the conversation between folkways and the elite of the ivory tower, the rabbis say sometimes you just have to go out and see what the common folk are doing. And then you can determine what the law should be. Sometimes societal norms come from grassroots movements. And sometimes they come by fiat, from leadership. This week, we watched what could go wrong when grassroots movements are misguided and misdirected. But we've also watched this week as leadership failed the people they were leading and were clearly ill-equipped to deal with the challenges they faced on the college campus. This week, in the Torah reading, we're offered a moment of wonderful insight. And it was hard for me to understand this text until I looked much deeper. It says, "Ve'al petach o moed lo heviu le'akriv karban l'Adonai lifnei mishkan Adonai, dam yechashev le'ish hahu, dam shafach v'nichrat ha'ish hahu mikerav amo." That a person brings their sacrifice to the Ohel Moed, to the door of the tent of meeting. It is at that point that the Kohen takes it from that individual and sacrifices it. Seems like a text we've seen so many times. It seems as though it's almost unnecessary. We know the Kohen offers sacrifice. We know that people don't walk into the Holy of Holies. Only that place is reserved for the high priest. So we have to ask ourselves the question, why does it tell us this again? Why is the text of the Torah telling us that a Kohen is supposed to bring a sacrifice? Well, the reason is pretty simple. It's not about that part of the verse at all. It's about the fact that we, as regular people, have to bring that sacrifice to the tent of meeting in the first place. There has to be, says the text, a partnership between Amcha, the people, and the high priest in order to offer a sacrifice. You see, the priest doesn't go out and find the animal. We bring it to him. A close reading of the Pasuk shows how each individual must participate in their own offering. Simply put, each person must bring their sacrifice to the door of the tent of meeting, where they'll be met in partnership by the leadership, who will then take it from them and take it to the next level. But the Malbim offers us this incredible insight. The Malbim, Meir Libush, Ben Yechiel, Michal, Weiser, offers us something really interesting. He says, you got to read it even closer than that. He says, V'zaraka kohenet adam, pasuk zeh miyoter legamre. He says, this is an additional reading that seems redundant. It seems like, why do we need this? Uperushu Chazal, that our sages taught, Sheba lomar shelakein yavinu le'azara kisham yizraka kohen adam. That the reason why was because this is where the sacrifice had to be offered. Ma she'en kein b'mama she'en tzarich kohen. Not like all of the little sacrificial altars we had set up all over the country. The Malbim points to a historical piece of evidence that there were sacrifices going on all throughout Israel. But this comes to teach that at some point there has to be central authority. That at some point you have to come together as a nation, not build your own little Shabbos for yourself, but rather come together as a nation. The Malbim says something really interesting. We have to see what's really going on in the world and then react accordingly. Our laws have to adapt to the world on some level. Yes, we want an ideal world prescribed by the Torah in which all people live according to God's will. But also sometimes the will of the law has to bend to what people want, what people desire. The instruction comes in this case to show that there needs to be a partnership between leadership and the people being led. For me, this insight is incredible because the Malbim is calling our attention on how to reconcile a text with what people were really doing. Neither are dismissed, not the Kohen and not the people. You can't make law from an ivy tower. You have to make it in the quad. I'm a student of the school of Jewish thought referred to as Wissenschaft der Judentum. Wissenschaft der Judentum is a German expression that means the science of Judaism. I've always felt that you can't just blindly follow the law. I've also never felt that you can only approach it emotionally. I believe that all Jewish practice, maybe even Jewish belief, must be placed in its historical context. And like all ideas, has to undergo rigorous examination. It must be placed in historical context, but also understood as the best we can do to understand what God wants of us. And then we can figure out what is the right behavior. After years of study together as a community, we decided that we were no longer going to observe the second day of Yontif. It's a weird thing that happened. You see, I went to my office on the second day of Yontif this year, which for me was a non-holy day. And as I do most mornings, I called my brother in Israel, who doesn't observe a second day, where they don't as a nation observe a second day. And he said to me, I can't believe you're in your office. And I said, why? It's not Yontif for me anymore. And he said, but you were able to just flip the switch like that? You felt comfortable going to work? And then the same scenario occurred again on the last day, which was really my first day of non-Yontif. And he said to me, are you really eating chametz today? I actually said, you betcha. But I'll be honest with you, it felt a little odd. Not because I felt I was doing anything wrong, but yes, because I felt I was doing something wrong. Because I hadn't fully integrated the emotional aspect and the intellectual aspect of being Jewish. But what I did was I decided that, in fact, I was going to force myself. Because if there's one thing, if there's one law, if there's one custom that keeps one Jew away from practicing their Judaism because they think it's ridiculous, then we have to do away with it. We can't afford to lose one Jew because of the sense that the whole system makes no sense. It was a custom to observe the second day of Yontif. And in my text here, I wrote custom, bold-faced, underlined, italicized, because it's not a law. Intellectually, it makes no sense anymore. There's a concept in the Torah, there's a concept in Taoism called feng shui. I'm sure you've all heard of it. So the concept of feng shui is a very important concept in Taoism. It suggests that there's a flow to the way the world works. And that if you put things in its path, you obstruct the flow of the universe. It's a deep concept. It's a concept that suggests to us that there is a momentum to life. And that we ought to, in our best way, hold on to that momentum if it's carrying us in the right direction. It's a very deep concept about aligning yourself with the universe. But guess what? It has been reduced today to how do you set up your furniture in your living room? Making sure that your desk isn't facing the wrong way. Making sure your bed is in the right corner of the room. And in many ways, we've done damage to the concept of feng shui. Oh, I can only imagine the damage we've done to our own religion. How we have attached to serious law silly superstition. And in many ways, we've done damage to ourselves. Look, we make choices all the time about what we're going to do and not do Jewishly. Everyone does it. I hope that our decisions on what we choose to do and what we choose not to do comes from serious reflection. Because our tradition is too important for lazy abandonment. I hope that our choices are based on thoughtful research and discovery and deep conversations, not just from exhaustion of living in a world that is incredibly challenging right now. And if you ever need help discerning the right path for you based on our tradition, I hope that you'll seek me out for counsel. I take it very seriously. Shabbat Shalom. We continue with Musaf, page 184. Chatzi Kaddish, please rise.